Thank you for joining this conversation today, and thanks to Eddie Avila and Rising Voices Initiative and Global Voices for co-hosting this webinar with us. So coronavirus and elections are only a few examples of heated topics when it comes to providing people with credible information. Access to credible information is a right. But fact-check information may only reach certain sectors of society, most likely those speaking more dominant languages. Are we doing enough to watch how misinformation and its spread are affecting linguistic and ethnic minorities and speakers of languages with relatively few media literacy resources? That is a question we have been asking ourselves continuously at First Draft, especially since the beginning of the pandemic and the related infodemic. But also it's a topic that came about quite early on in our conversations with Eddie and other members of Global Voices. We want this webinar to be a place for journalists and fact checkers, but also researchers and other organizations to meet some of these fighters for accurate information in local, regional, or under-resourced languages, to understand their issues, but also to learn from their experiences and techniques. We would like to make a short poll about this just to start the conversation. Do you believe that the language you speak online has an impact, positive or negative, on your exposure to misinformation? Okay, well, that's a very clear answer. Eddie, do you have any comments on that one?
No, I think that was pretty surprising that 100% said yes. I'm sure we'd love to hear from everyone on why they think that's so, but maybe we'll have a chance later on to maybe explore that result a little bit later.
Definitely. So I also wanted to give you a very short introduction about who we are at First Draft, and then I'll pass on the floor to Eddie to give you a quick introduction about Rising Voices and Global Voices as well, so that you know where we're speaking from. So at First Draft, we work to empower people with the knowledge, understanding, and tools needed to build resilience against harmful, false, and misleading information in the moments that matter. We do that by providing training for newsrooms and organizations around online information disorder, but also by doing research and initiating and supporting collaborative information networks. Now, Eddie, I'll let you introduce Global Voices.
Yeah, Global Voices, we're an international network of bloggers, writers, academics, translators, and digital rights activists who are working to bring news, information, to encourage participation from all sectors of society around the world. And that's where a little bit where Rising Voices, the digital inclusion arm of Global Voices, has been working especially to work with underrepresented, marginalized communities from around the world, supporting them to participate more actively online, whether that's sharing information or consuming information, but being part of that media ecosystem. And that's been sort of some of our interests in the past 10 years, how these communities are interacting with kind of the global conversation.
Thank you. So let's introduce ourselves as well. First of all, I want to thank Jennifer, who is taking care of the coordination and the logistics to make this webinar slick and working. She will also be there to collect your questions and read them out loud at different parts of this webinar. So do not hesitate to put your questions or comments or share your experiences in the chat box. And Jennifer will be there to share them with us. Eddie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm the Rising Voices Director at Global Voices. I'm based in Bolivia, and I've been with Global Voices for around 15 years now in different roles, and we're really excited to be a part of this webinar with First Draft.
Thank you. So my name is Marie Bonner. I'm the Global Head of Partnerships at First Draft, and I have been working with First Draft for the last, I think, 2 years or something. I'm French and German, so I'll ask for your understanding as my English is far from perfect. So before we move to introducing our speakers for today, and as this webinar is part of a series, I wanted to take a moment to reflect on the key findings of the parts 1 and 2 of this series, which were addressing misinformation and reporting in India, Australia, South Asia for the first one, and then focusing on Africa Check's work in Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa for the second one. So my colleague Ali, for example, shared his knowledge of the Indian context of news consumptions, explaining that the context is everything, is key. Caste, class, religion, language, history, and gender are essential paradigms in India. Should journalists simplify matters to make them more understandable? But if so, how to remain faithful to a story? That's part of what they discussed in this first webinar. Also, Ali mentioned that 82% of Indians are using WhatsApp, but maybe do not know, for example, that a doctored image is actually a thing. So that's also something we might discuss with one of our speakers afterwards. My colleague Anne explained how to avoid the pitfalls of parachute journalism. She did work in Hong Kong as an Australian journalist and started by learning the language and the cultural nuances by working with local media. And that's also something very important to our conversation today, the question of regional and local media. And then Krisanti Gyoti did a very interesting observation of how reporters should be brave enough to break through the stereotypes. She talked about reporting in refugee camps and how sometimes the refugees themselves were trapped to speak as they were expected to by global reporters. So how are we overcoming that fool's game into reporting? The question of context was also expressed as a major key of understanding the channels and the content of information in Africa Check's work. Lee Muiti, Africa Check's chief editor, detailed how some specific misinformation narratives or conspiracy theories could find a breeding ground in some countries because of the social and cultural context, and gave the example of South Africa. Peter Conliffe-Jones, one of Africa Check's founders, also explained how the project of Africa Check came up as a necessity to do journalism properly, and how monoculture newsrooms, especially at mainstream global level, are part of a global bias in reporting as well. At the end of the day, the process of reporting and fighting disinformation is all about trust. If people, news consumers, feel that they are not represented, they trust the media less and thus leave more space for disinformation to spread. So we will share all the links to these previous webinars, as well as other links that will be talked about during this webinar in a follow-up email after the webinar. I now let Eddie introduce our speakers.
Yeah, thanks. We're really fortunate to have a really diverse group of speakers from different backgrounds, different experiences. I'd like to ask each one to just briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into the first section. So, Kepani, could you start, please?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everybody. I'm Penai Traore. I come from Burkina Faso, and now I'm working in France for Radio France Internationale, RFI. I'm the former editor-in-chief of the Mandengo newsroom, RFI Mandenkan. It's local languages in West Africa, Bambara, Mandingo, Dioula. It's Bambara. It's a language which is speaking in Mali, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Gambia, and Guinea. So sorry for my broken English.
Great. That's great. Thank you. Rahul? You're on mute right now. Yeah, he's still on mute. Maybe we'll go to Ndog first, and then we'll come back to Rahul.
Yes.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Okay. So hi all. My name is Rahul Namburi. I come from India. I represent a company called Fact Crescendo. We are based in India. but we work in two other countries, which are Sri Lanka and Myanmar. We've been focusing majorly on regional languages. So we're doing 9 languages in India, and we're doing 3 languages Sri Lanka and 2 languages in Myanmar. So there's a lot that we've been focusing on regional languages. So I think there's a lot we'll be sharing our thoughts on it. So look forward.
Great, thank you. And Doc.
Thank you so much. My name is Ndalk. I am a professor at Hamlin University in the United States, St. Paul, Minnesota. I have been with Global Voices for almost 10 years now. I have been contributor, editor, and again, contributor with Global Voices. Um, I was a co-founder of Global Voices Amharic, and I also translator for Global Voices. I speak Amharic, my mother tongue, and Oromo language as well as my mother tongue. And I do some research on misinformation, disinformation about Ethiopia that involves these two languages, two major Ethiopian languages. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks. So yeah, we'll dive right into the first section, talking about misinformation in under-resourced languages. So when Marie and First Drafts first approached us about potentially collaborating together on looking at misinformation through a language lens, we're really excited because that's something we're really interested in, how different language communities are not only creating information in their language, but also sharing and interacting with information. And we know that as more and more people get online, the availability of mobile devices become more prominent, that more and more people are accessing information. And so when we knew we wanted to talk about languages, but how do we classify that? How do we categorize those languages? And I think coming up with a term, it's a term that's been used before, but under-resourced languages. So not necessarily small languages or even endangered languages, but rather languages that we feel that we have seen that may not have many resources for fact checking in their languages, or even different, a variety of media sources where people can get different opinions on things they see. And so here in Latin America, we're really interested in how indigenous communities especially are consuming information and sharing information. Rising Voices works really close with a lot of indigenous communities here in the region. And we hear stories about maybe monolingual speakers who are using smartphones to communicate with their loved ones because that's the only way they can, or that's a really important way. But what happens if the interface is not in their language? That they find a way to make it work, whether it's memorizing kind of the process to get audio messages from their friends and family. And so I think recognizing that there's a lot of people who are interacting with information that may not have access to these great, fact-checking initiatives that may be in Spanish. And so I think that's what we wanted to maybe talk about, how we consider language as really important part of this fact-checking universe and making sure that people have access to really high quality and verified information. And just kind of I think we all know 2020 has been a really crazy year, here in Bolivia, especially with the pandemic, but we've also had elections. And so I think we've seen how different information is being spread in different channels, not only digitally, but also word of mouth, but also traditional community radio. But I think keeping that in mind, how does that inform us how these communities are, part of the information flow? So I'm really excited to hear from 3 different perspectives in this part of the section. I'll turn it back to Marie.
Thank you. Well, in terms of impact of misinformation, India appeared to us as a natural space to look at to start this conversation with 22 scheduled languages, meaning with an official status in the country, and an estimation of 427 languages, India is key when it comes to diversity and complexity for media reach and coverage. An organization like Fact Crescendo works in 7 different Indian regional language once you take away the main language of Hindi and English. As Rahul has said, they also work in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. So when we are talking about Odia, Tamil, Malayalam, or Assamese, we are talking about regional languages, but also about dozens of millions of speakers in the world's largest democracy. So Rahul, what is Fact Crescendo's approach to tackling misinformation, considering India's incredible linguistic diversity? And is the impact of misinformation different from one language to the next?
Okay, Mary, as you aptly said, we have 22 languages which are recognized by the government, and some of the union states in Indian Union have been formed basis language. So we can understand what kind of language diversity we have in India. These are just recognized language. We've been working in 7 regional, as in Indian languages. Plus, there are 2 languages, English and Hindi, which are the mainstream languages. So, our approach in tackling misinformation is one which we follow is if we have regional teams. So people who are working from these different states, they are people who have been working in these states for a very long time, so that they understand the cultural, social, political, and other key aspects of these regions. So a fact checker or a researcher who is working in Assam fairly understands the entire, because the political situation in India changes from state to state. So that is one thing. Our our resources who work for us, they are our that's our first approach in terms of their understanding of the region. Secondly, monitoring, understanding what kind of political situations prevail, because the region being so long, we have different political parties in different states. As in, if we move towards south, it is more of the left, ruling parties. In northern India, it is more on the right ideology and all. So. Our first approach is very clear that people who are representing Fact Crescendo in these regions, they completely understand the key aspects of those regions. Okay, so apart from that, there is monitoring. The monitoring is they keep on monitoring the social media channels. We have WhatsApp groups, so there's a lot of connect that happens between these regional people and our regional teams, so that any misinformation that is going viral. So not everything, because India, as you said, WhatsApp is one of the major 85% people in our country use it, and mostly it's also being used in local languages. So we have dedicated WhatsApp channels where people send in lot of requests, and in turn our team processes it, and in a way we have a very personal, like these WhatsApp groups that we have. It's a very personal approach that the fact check is delivered to these people in their inboxes, or in those groups where it is directly they know about the facts. So this is what I would say our approach is. Our resources, and in turn they are the one who produce and fight misinformation on these regional levels.
Thank you very much. Eddie, I'll let you go from there.
Great. Now I think we'll shift to Ethiopia and my colleague Endok. And I think we talked about the role of misinformation in Ethiopia. As we know, Ethiopia has gone through different crises this year, in addition to the pandemic, in June and July with the assassination of a popular singer, and now, with the conflict in Tigray region. I think especially in times of crisis, people look for information to see what's happening how they could protect themselves, how they could see what's happening in the country. Um, but I think, unfortunately, we saw the internet shut off as well, and that may prevent, maybe the people that decide to shut off the internet may think that they are preventing, misinformation from being spread, but it also prevents people from finding accurate information. So I want to ask Endog a little bit about that. Um, how misinformation has cut across different ethnic and linguistic lines in Ethiopia, and how you, as a researcher, as an observer of that, saw how the internet shut off affected people's access to high quality information.
So much now. Yeah, so that's a great question. So first of all, a kind of background, like a contextual information. I've heard that someone saying the context is very important. It's everything. So Ethiopia is, of course, is not as diverse as India, but it's diverse. We have about 86 languages, three major languages, but most of these languages are under resourced, and there is no lot of fact checking going on these languages. Amharic is the major language. It's all over the place on social media. There are a lot of popular channels in people sharing information on Amharic, Afan Oromo, Tigrinya, Somali, and Sidama. These are like major languages that have a lot of presence on social media, and you can imagine that there is a lot of misinformation, disinformation that cut across all this. So it has the following feature. One is that there is misinformation within the community, within the language speakers. That, for example, most of misinformation is about political issues. For example, the current conflict that's going on in Tigray region, because of the internet shutdown, there is a completely two universe of information ecosystem. People living in Tigray region do not know what's going on because they don't have any major information system that is coming through them because internet is shut down, and they only kind of hear what is broadcasted from the regional formerly regional administrator called the Tigray Liberation Front, or the TPLF. And so that is, they have a completely different perspective in and how the conflict is unfolding. So that is one. That is within the community. And there is across the community as well. There are people, for example, in Ethiopia, overwhelming majority of the Ethiopian people kind of consider the TPLF, the regional administrator, are the one who started the conflict. But the Tigray regional administrators say that they didn't start. So you can see how this information or misinformation mismatch across communities within the community as well. So one that affects, internet shutdown affects misinformation in this manner. There is like a disjointed understanding of what is going on, who started it, and how it's unfolding. So that is one. The second one is health again, like science information. Science information is completely full of misinformation. We can talk about, for example, the pandemic. I've seen different viral information that have different interpretation across communities. And in some communities, they say, for example, the pandemic is a deliberate uh, push from the government to postpone election or to do something. That is in one community. And in the other community, for in urban areas, for example, in Addis, you see, okay, the pandemic is not deliberate, but it's not as harmful as people are talking about. So you can see how disjointed, and there is a lot of mismatch within even Ethiopian community, a larger Ethiopian community, and within diverse Ethiopian community. So you can see how misinformation and disinformation cut across different communities in Ethiopia. And that is also exacerbated by internet shutdown sometimes, or by, you know, information that comes from the government or from regional administrators. So that is how misinformation and disinformation unfolds. And the other one that I have seen is that like corporate fact checking or corporate money is not available for most of platforms in these languages. They don't even recognize that there is a language, for example, called Sidama in Facebook or on maybe Google. So they don't fact check, they don't verify information from these languages. This is an indication that these languages are under resourced. And I have said that we have, significant number of followers or for people who are on social media platforms from different community. In Somali, for example, uh, Ethiopian Somali, there is no lot of fact checking, or like there is no corporate like fact checking processes that I have seen or that I have come across. That is also another indication that how this internet uh, diversity on internet affects misinformation and disinformation. So these are the major characteristics of how misinformation and disinformation works on Ethiopia in under-resourced languages.
Great, thanks so much, and Doc. Next, Kipani, no, I'm not saying your name correctly. I apologize. As you mentioned, um, you work for RFI. You've been very much involved with, providing information media in West Africa. So I wanted to maybe get a sense of from you, from your experience, not only as a media producer, but also someone that may consume information or and know the region very well. Could you give us maybe a broad overview of how speakers of this language, of the Manding languages, traditionally consume information, how they share information, whether it's digitally, whether it's more traditional media, word of mouth. Just give us a general idea of how people in the region are sharing information and consuming information um, in the region.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Mari. Thank you, Jennifer, to invite me. I'm very excited to be here online with you to share my point of view about this important concern. As a media consumer and as someone who works in the media as a journalist, I noticed that misinformation shared is shared by people on the digital way, like WhatsApp group, Facebook group. You can see that people share some information for share some information in the one group and the message going viral. How it's work? When someone receives a false information from a digital platform like Facebook or WhatsApp, you consume it and then share it with a dozen people. So the recipient equally share it and others share the information and so on and so on. The message goes viral. People spread fake news and intentionally. They don't know that it's a danger for them. It's a danger for their communities. And it has become more pronounced with the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, when we heard that the coronavirus is a disease for the wealthy people, that poor people cannot be infected, because in some of the countries, for example, in mine, Burkina Faso, and also in Mali, government members were infected first by the coronavirus. So people share the information that coronavirus is a wealthy people disease. Poor people cannot be infected by the disease. So the journalists have to do the job to explain that it's a pandemic, it's a virus who can be catched by everyone in everywhere, wealthy people, poor people. So even if there are sensitization campaigns to prevent, many people still do not believe in the virus existence. And for the next problem with the misinformation, I think it will be the vaccination. The vaccination, people begin to share some information about the future vaccination about the coronavirus. People would not have to be vaccinated for this disease. So when you take some WhatsApp group in my family, for example, we have a WhatsApp group, but I have some uncles and some aunts who share regularly some information about the disease. I'm a journalist. Sometimes I see the information and I have to explain that this is not the right information. So this is my family. I think it's many cases around me, around my around other people. It's the same way. I think digital way. Comment dire, Marie? L'Internet joue un grand rôle dans,
So,
voilà,
so
dans la désinformation.
online
Oui.
conversation plays a major role in disinformation. Mais tu l'avais dit avant déjà et tu l'as parfaitement dit en anglais, pas de problème.
Super. Okay, super.
Okay.
So for Mandingo languages, Bambara languages, it's more impacted by misinformation. In my journalist work, I noticed that every day, every week, sometimes we have some questions by the people who want to know if some information is right or false about coronavirus. But comment dire, je suis contente de savoir que les gens veulent savoir, ils nous demandent parfois, ils ont des informations, ils sont pas sûrs, ils nous demandent. Donc c'est déjà un pas, voilà.
So what she's saying is that she's happy that people are actually looking for information and that they are actually asking for information because that's the first step and that they are there to answer the information. Merci.
Thank you, Marie. So I think to tackle the misinformation, it's very important to control what people post on the digital media, what people share on the digital media. For me, to fight against it's important to control this way of sharing of misinformation.
Maybe that's exactly why it's probably more difficult to do it in under-resourced languages because we will maybe talk about it afterwards, but monitoring takes a lot of time and a lot of resources as well. And I guess that doing that in various languages is also a challenge in itself. Let me try to share my screen again. So we all know that all languages are not equal when it comes to misinformation, as we just saw and we just discussed. And we hope that the examples shared by our speakers for now will help to contribute to a better understanding of the nuances to apply when it comes to covering these matters. But we're also here today to focus on solutions and initiatives that exist to fight misinformation in these under-resourced languages and communities. We were inspired, both Eddie and I, by our speaker's work, and we wanted to share it with you in more detail. So there was just a quick introduction point that I wanted to make about this topic, and we discussed it a bit already. And it's also a discussion we had with Africa Check. When we are talking about such a diverse range of languages and community, we also have to consider variety in formats and not only in contents. So fact-checking is good, but making sure to reach out to the people that are impacted by misinformation is another story. Specific situations such as literacy rate or internet connectivity need to be considered, as well as the way information spreads more efficiently from one culture or one language to the next. Is it online or on printed media? Is it via WhatsApp, text or video, radio, podcasts? So there are lots of different ways to actually reach out to populations, and we need to know what are the ways they use to share information the most. A crucial element to that is that one size does not fit all, and I guess that's something that all of you face daily. Eddie, you wanted to share some examples with us from Ecuador and Peru.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I think slowly more and more people are recognizing the need to reach some of these communities. And there's been some efforts in Latin America, especially to do that. You know, a group here in Bolivia called Hakearu, they're doing a campaign using memes just to start educating people on what to look for, and just to even consider that not everything on the internet is real. Just be more critical on what they're consuming. And so they're using, you know, graphics and something much more, you know, more playful, more fun to do so. a group in Peru called Ojo Público has been also producing um, some material, some fact check information in some of the Amazon languages, Awahun, but they're choosing an audio format, recognizing that even though there may be X number of speakers, that a large percentage may not read or write the language, but rather consume it, orally or through audio. And so making that available in audio format is really important. Like that it could be shared in messaging apps or also even team up with community radio stations to play that as public service announcements. And with the COVID pandemic, our friends at the Endangered Languages Program, based in Canada, has been crowdsourcing resources that have been produced through the pandemic, and organizing by language and by formats. But I think with that, what we've been seeing is that it's really important that there's local knowledge involved with that, and understand the context. As Endog said, is really important. The context, um, people to not only just translate something, but rather localize it, make it understandable in concepts, in world visions, world views that people may approach. I think some communities trusted sources are different across different cultures, and so who or what may be trusted in one culture may not be the same in another culture. And so keeping that in consideration is really important in kind of the things that we're seeing online as this approach this is developing. We'll start back up with the questions, and we'll go in reverse order. So Kipani, I'll ask you again, um, as someone who's working with media in the region, what do you think the media's responsibility or also opportunity to reach these language communities with factually correct information? Um, in a part of the world, maybe there's not as many choices. For example, in Bambara, maybe there's not as many sources that there are in French. And so how can media outlets play a role in in providing this type of factually correct information and helping to debunk misinformation?
Thank you for this question. For me, media have a big responsibility to tackle misinformation because communities in the local languages do not have resources to know um, if an information is false or right. This is the media responsibility to check the information and to spread what is right. So in Burkina Faso and Mali, for example, many media work to local languages like Bambara to inform communities, but most of them are offline. Most of the media which work in the local languages are offline. They don't have resources to be visible on internet. So it's a big problem for these media because internet is not designed for them or because they have many difficult to access to internet. So internet should be an opportunity to every languages for every media to be more visible, but it's not the case in the many areas. So some media try um, to fact checking some information and to spread on the internet. But what about the communities who don't have access on the internet? It's the main problem, the main concern. This population don't have internet, but they have radio because they should they currently earth information news on the radio, but not the internet. So for me, the media have to work to spread the right information on the internet, but also on the traditional media like radio, press, TV. It's a way a way to tackle the misinformation for me. So media have a big responsibility, but some media unfortunately don't check information before broadcast or before spread them on the internet. So this is very dangerous for the communities to read or to hear about this kind of information come from traditional media. So now we have some media like Bembere Veri Feed Mali, who work on fact and fake news to to explain if an information is right or false. But Bembere do this in the local languages, Bambara, Soninke, Fulfulde, but it's only offline. So Bembere do this for the radio. When you go on the website of Bembere, you will see the fact checking, but only in French. For the local languages, the Bembere is focused on the radio, only for the radio to do fact checking. I can also take the example of RFI Mandenkan. We've broadcast on social media videos in Bambara with some medicine doctor to explain some information about the virus. Both projects are funded by other organizations. This is a problem. It's not the project of the local media, of the local organizations. The projects are funded by other organizations, which means that local media don't have more resources to work on the information to give to communities the good information.
Thank you very much. And that's a very interesting insight. I would like to get back to that point, but from a researcher's point of view. Endal, what suggestions do you have as a researcher and as an observer about some of the ways to reach out to language that are under-resourced or minority languages? Did you do some work on that from a research perspective, and do you have any feedback on that?
Yes. So as I said, we have significant number of communities whose languages are under resourced, and most NGO works or activism or corporate fact-checking initiatives that, for example, Facebook's and Google's usually goes to people who are well connected, who are based in urban areas, and that really harms the fact-checking in process and people, the right of people to get verified information, particularly about science information, health information, political information or misinformation is also part of it. But I think there must be a way to expand those opportunities to very under-resourced languages. There are people who are across Ethiopia from different language communities who are willing to verify, fact check. So this is one thing that the people should consider when they invest money or when they get money to people who are fact checking. This is very good. We have to expand the opportunity, and we have to recruit people who are the speaker, the native speakers of those languages. That's very important. The second one, that even though that people have had, been hired to fact check, that I have seen some initiatives that works in Amharic, in Oromo language, and in English. We need also to give them like contextual training and how to fact check, how to verify, because fact checking is not simply because I have seen like it's like he said, she said kind of fact checking, but we need to have a very nuanced, contextual kind of fact checking, because Ethiopia has a very complicated and complex political context. So we need to understand that. We need to have those um, resources invested on the capacity or the ability of fact checkers themselves. We need to give them a training. So that is very important. The third thing that I have seen, that there is of course the international dimension of this that skewed the opinion of a lot of the so-called international community. For example, when we talk about what's going on in Ethiopia currently, about the conflict, that major news organizations, their reporting is completely biased. It's off the mark. Their analysis is off the mark. And that because emanates because of this fact-checking process on the ground is either is conducted by people who are politically connected or by people who do not have the capacity to provide facts and only facts. So we need to have that. We need to have that contextual training. And the reporting that I have seen over the last months is one of the instances where fact-checking initiatives is not properly done on the ground, is impacting the international dimension, the international reporting of what's going on in that. So we need to have those things. So media literacy or training and expanding opportunities and giving what fact checking is. Fact checking is not he said, she said, and we need to have like contextual because there are, like, for example, historically false claims. We need to give for a fact checker when he reports or when he verify historical claims, he needs to consider these things and those historical claims and the resources available for that. So it's very important to consider this when we do fact checking on the ground. It's very important.
Great, thanks, Endok. And Rahul, we'd love to hear a bit more about Factor Sendo and sort of the process that you go through with fact checking different items you've seen in some of these languages. Could you walk us through, generally the process of working in these languages, and also maybe if you could add how are you ensuring that you're reaching a population that may not be online that may choose to consume information in more traditional formats or orally as well.
Uh, yes. So, see, for this, we'll need to understand there are different processes that, as factors into, we follow. For despite for all the languages, the processes are the same. But when we speak language specific, for example, if we are taking a language which is Malayalam, so our Malayalam team had already, we use certain tools such as CrowdTangle. So the team already has around 800 or 900, groups added to it, which are monitored daily. These are, the pages which over time we have seen probably put in some misleading or some disinformation or misinformation. So that is one way. Twitter list is something. So what we have done every week, we keep monitoring the trends which are going viral in regional languages. So there is a data that is maintained. So we have those trending, keywords in those languages, and those keywords are then saved in the keyword data set. We So that is one way of collecting the data, and the keywords, the list that we prepare on Twitter are updated in all these languages as and when. So what we do is, like, supposedly we are monitoring social media platform, if, for example Twitter, and we see someone posting something which is misinformation. We kind of monitor, we kind of add those people to the list. We Whenever we do a story, whatever whichever users or pages who are spreading those kind of information, we kind of create lists for them so that they can, because most of them are repeated, they repeatedly share such information. So monitoring in that way becomes easy for us. um, so the keyword databases is something, Twitter list is something, managing CrowdTangle pages and updating them is something. Apart from that, every story that is done on the basis of there are four important things. One is verifiability, whether the claim that we are picking for fact checking can be verified or not, because fact check, obviously, like it's been said, it is evidences, those will speak for them. Importance, relevance, and virality. So these are the key things that we have to keep in mind. Like someone said, how misinformation travels. It is not only that from major languages, which is English or Hindi. It is also how misinformation travels internationally. So during COVID time, we have seen that some misinformation or disinformation which was there in Spain, or in Italy, it somehow made, it somehow got viral in India after some time in mainstream language. And then gradually that same claim we saw coming up in regional languages with it. And every time the claim or that disinformation or misinformation gets a local flavor added to it. So in English or Hindi, it would be something else. But when it moves to a, Malayalam or Assamese or Tamil, it will have that local connect added to it, be it talking about, a cure or something preventing, COVID. So during COVID time, we've seen this. Second example that I would like to give is like in 2018, there were within 2 months we had around 18 lynching incidents. Those happened in India. This was majorly when that we've been having a lot of protest and other things for the past so many years, and now it is farmers protest. So within 2 months there were 18 lynching incidents, and this was all because of misinformation or disinformation, as in mostly on WhatsApp or something. It was in Tamil Nadu, we would see something going viral on WhatsApp, and the villagers is believing that these people are child abductors, and then lynching them. So in a way, and these claims are not something that they are there on the regional level only, because if it is there in Tamil Nadu, the same set of claim or the same set of video or something would come up in a different language. So somewhere, uh, the flow of misinformation, we see that most of the claims, they travel all across. Now coming to the question of how do we get to our users, how do we reach those people who could. So what we have seen, uh, WhatsApp is one of the best mediums, because that is reaching to them, those groups very quickly. But again, not everyone is literate, not everybody could read and write. So creating content, in a video format, or a voiceover format, just having clips and having a voiceover, and then pushing it down to these people, sending it to them, and obviously Facebook and Twitter. So we have started doing a weekly roundup of videos, voiceover videos, which are then sent to these people, because we do understand the literacy rate in India is not much, and people generally, if it is a graphic or if it is a video in their language, they try to understand more better. Second, what we have also done in regional languages as well as in our major language, we have started something called as visual fact check. So we do understand that not every claim that is there on social media is would require a story to it. Sometimes it is it's just a Google reverse, or it's just a simple debunk. What we do is like we kind of create a graphic around it, what the claim is, and the original source of information with the original graphic, and we then propagate it to these users. uh, Again, something very important which was said, uh, doing fact checks on our part is something we're doing it, but again, getting these people, how to teach them how to fact check, what to believe, what not to believe, rather than sharing something, that is very important, and that I think needs to be worked on. As our part, we've been holding workshops in these regions for media students. We've been having workshops where we give them, where we tell them basically how to basic tools to fact check, what to believe, rather than if there is something, just don't share it, send it to us or any fact checker. Let the verified information come to you. But yes, there's a lot to be done, and it can only be done when the media literacy is there in these grassroots levels. So this is what Fact Crescendo has been doing, and we think it's not at the pace that we would have wanted it to be, but yes, gradually we all are doing our bit and our part. And education is something which we think which will play a very crucial role for the grassroots level people.
We'll go into questions right now. We're running a bit late, but we're going to address some of the questions. Jan's going to facilitate that, and then we'll share the resources.
Hi, everyone. So we have a few questions in the chat box. Firstly, we have a really good one here. It says, is it just a case of having as many people working on fact checking as possible to cover as many languages as possible and making sure you have at least one person who understands that particular landscape, or are there other potentially less costly solutions?
Okay, so because we've been doing languages, what I would think is less costly solutions. A way of doing it is translating what you are doing in the mainstream main languages, just translating them. That's the best non-cost solution to it. But when it comes to fact checking, we do need to have people in these regions who understand, who could produce that kind of, because fact checking will not only have would not be done on, again, he said, who said, basis. There is a lot of research that would need to be done. There's a lot of journalist work that needs to be done. So yes, uh, low cost solution is what others have been doing, is translating. But what we've been doing, we've been hiring journalists and we've been training them and then putting them on job, because regional misinformation can only be tackled when the aspect of that region is understood, which national journalist would not be apt for.
Okay, we have another good question here. This is put out for all of you guys. In WhatsApp in particular, information is so interpersonal. For coronavirus, would it be helpful to work with the community leaders in under-resourced languages to make sure they are hearing directly from medical professions about the truth and then having them spread the information in their WhatsApp communities? Or are there other approaches that would be helpful?
I'll take that one. See, that is one way of doing it. Having the right information and then pushing it down the WhatsApp groups. But again, we also need to understand something, that not all claims related to health are can be done just like it's everything takes time, because there is a deep research involved. Secondly, I think the question was, what is the best way to push the fact checks, right? Yeah. So it is not only WhatsApp, because WhatsApp becomes there is a limitation. You can only reach. Yes, it is a very good way, because obviously, if there is misinformation, if it gets propagated by these platforms, if you put in the right information, there are chances that with the equal, it would also reach the same amount of people. But getting that information on Facebook, targeting those groups, pushing it down, all see what we've been doing. We've been using all the social media platforms, right from Instagram, Facebook and all. For COVID specific, all the IFCN certified fact checkers were a part of COVID Alliance, where hashtag Coronavirus Alliance was a tag which was used by IFCN, and all the fact checkers who have we were from 77 countries. It was a great work we all have put together, with approximately around 10,000 stories around debunking information about. So if something like this happens for things like, which are global things, I think the reach automatically amplifies. It automatically amplifies, because it's a larger group working and larger sharing of information or fact checks that happen.
Thank you, Rahul. We have another question for all panelists. Does the performance of the popular fact-checking tools such as CrowdTangle, Invid, Hoaxy decline for under-researched languages? If so, how do you work around it?
I think one of the disadvantage of having big global tools like CrowdTangle, using those tools to fact check on under-resourced languages is one of the disadvantages. So those tools are not made for those languages. So when you do research, for example, when you do not only CrowdTangle, but other tools, where if you want to do some kind of network analysis or so visualize some media on social media, when you use those tools do not understand those languages. Okay, so that is the pitfall of having those big Silicon Valley produced or any other like big company produced fact checking tools do not work on local context because there is no they're made at either for English or major languages. So that is a disadvantage. That is why we call those languages under resourced because we don't have those tools. Either you have to do it manually, which means that you have to train people, you have to give capacity building, or you have to redesign those tools, which is expensive again. So it's very hard. And I think what people on local environment in Ethiopia do is they both apply to understand the trend where those things are going, but they when they do the fact checking, they do it manually. That is how you work around.
For me, it's we have another problem because most of the journalists are not trained to use the fact-checking tools. Most of the journalists cannot use the fact-checking tools in the local languages like Bambara. We can do only some videos, writing something to explain if it's hurt or right. But the main tools to do fact checking, to explore the data, it's a big problem for the journalists in local languages to work with them. For for me, first we have to train the journalists and we have to educate it. To educated people, communities about the using of the social media and the other tools. With them, we can verify, we can checking some information and put it on the internet.
Do you have any examples of information being understood or communicated differently in Hindi compared to Urdu? And if yes, what do you think are the main factors, just language or also culture? And then if any of the other speakers would like to answer that, do you have any information or examples of something being explained differently in a different language?
For the
Okay.
same information, will it be phrased differently in Hindi or in Urdu, for example? And are there other examples in other languages where in the same country, for example, you will explain the same information in a different way depending on the language? I think that was the idea.
Not really, because see, uh, okay. So when we are talking about misinformation, at least with Indian context, see, English and Hindi are the main languages where we find if it is a national, something going viral in on pan India basis, we'll find it there. See, the way fact checks have been done, despite of the language, because fact checks are evidence based, they are facts based. So only the language may change. The way it is being written. So if it is a Hindi article, but we are finding the same claim in Urdu, it is only the language that would change. But yes, the context, the findings, and probably if there's anything additional, related to that language, that would be the same. We would have the same evidences and the same facts in the other language also. There is absolutely no difference between no difference in evidences. So what I say is that fact check is all about evidences, and it's the factual write up of what is going wrong. So it is only the language that will get changed, no, not the context of what is written.
Talk a little bit about like 1 minute. So on the factors. So the question: do you think it is language or culture? It's not only language or culture, but politicians as well. People who, communicate, particularly politicians, advocacy people, also communicate the same information or the same kind of factors differently. So I can give you an example. For example, the current conflict in Ethiopia, which is going on in Tigray, at the heart of that conflict, of course, there is this border conflict between Eritrea and Ethiopia. So there was a war 20 years ago between Ethiopia and Eritrea. And when the war was completed, there was a decision that was made by the court that there is a district that was mapped uh, on Eritrean side, but that was decided by the court. But the politicians, when they communicate, they say the court decided for us, for Ethiopia. And most Ethiopians consider that as a fact. But while the fact is not that that district was mapped towards Ethiopia. So when they communicated, they misinformed it, they were misleadingly. So politicians, and there is this saying that I have seen on Twitter, that misinformation usually comes from the top. So that is one thing, that there is, of course, language, there is culture, and there is also people with an agenda or politicians with an agenda. They also are the ones. There's a factor that is contributed, especially on political issues. You can also see that during, like, for example, there is Ethiopian Great Renaissance Dam, GERD, the big dam in the Africa. Ethiopia is building. There is a negotiation between three countries, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. I have seen different information ecosystem on Ethiopian side, on Egyptian side. There is a lot of misinformation and what's going on, how the agreement is unfolding, what is the negotiation going looks like. So there is an Egyptian ecosystem, language ecosystem universe, and there is an Ethiopian universe, and there is completely different information system running around this. So that is, of course, language, culture, also politicians. So politicians also are the ones who are misleading. That is a big factor too.
Okay, Mary, I'll just add to it because I completely misunderstood the context of that question. Yes, it does happen. It does happen. We can take an example. Currently, there's a farmer protest which is happening in India. So, most of the claims that we are currently we've fact checked. If it is in Hindi, probably if it is related to so culture is something, religion is something that plays a very major role in India. um, uh, so we have seen some of the videos where one community is helping other community. In one language we are finding claims which are against that community, stating look how they have collaborated and they are trying to create. But again, when we are seeing those claims in other language, which is probably Urdu, we are finding a very different narrative to it. And rightly said, it comes from top. There are influencers. So what is happening now, at least what we have been seeing, they have become so smart that they kind of these influencers, they could be politician or some actors or something. What they do is like they very aptly will put some comment which subjectively can mean different to different people, and then people who follow certain ideology will take they will take the context what they want to take, and then they start propagating it. So when you go when you pinpoint it to that person who is an influencer, he completely comes back and says, look, I have not said it in this context, it is people who are taking it. So this is what we see, and this is what has been happening, and probably this is the way they have now understood how to tweak the system. They would say their thing, and then people take it, the different ideologies will take it to and against thing. So yes, religion is something. So coming back, language is not something. Language sometimes we see, but religion plays a major roles. For example, when COVID happened in India, as I always say, COVID never had a religion, but in India it found a religion. So it was pinned to one particular community where they had a huge gathering, and they went back, and they were the super spreaders of that disease. So yes, that is here.
Maybe just one last question.
Should WhatsApp chatbots be used well more to counter misinformation, e.g., the IFCN and their chatbot in Hindi about COVID-19?
Yes, we are a part of that chatbot, and yes, see, uh, information, every fact check that is done in Hindi related to COVID, uh, it is easy for people who have subscribed to them and to get the right information. But apart from that, in India, we are also running a pilot project with WhatsApp, which is there in all the regional languages that we are doing. It's a chatbot, and the kind of growth that we have seen in the past few months is huge. So in a way, chatbots are in a way, it is good to counter misinformation. In COVID, we have seen that in Hindi we're using it. But apart from this example, even if for our regular languages, regional languages, we see a lot of subscribers regularly coming back to us and writing to us that this is something which is very good, because they do get their daily dose of correct information. And if it is something which has been fact checked before, or it is there in the system, they automatically, because it's a bot, they automatically get those stories delivered. So yes, that's a the bots are a good way of reaching out to people.
Okay, let's move on to the resources then, because we really wanted to share resources with you all as well, because as we have been talking quite a lot about the need for training, the need for information, the need for resources, we wanted to be able to make sure for you to have these resources that all the speakers have to recommend to you, which are resources for content, but also resources for tools and trainings that is free and available. So I just wanted us to go very, very quickly, because there is a bit of resources there, and we want to make sure not to be too much more late than we are already. And we will send all the links to you anyway in the follow-up email, so don't worry about that. So first of all, here are some of the resources that were recommended by Penay. Can you just like talk about them? And
Yes, it's a video made by the RFI Mandenkan newsroom to explain some misinformation about coronavirus. So the journalist called a medicine doctor and asked him a question about coronavirus. So how to use a mask, like some people said, coronavirus is people are infected by the coronavirus by the mosquito, so it's false. So the journalist asked a medicine doctor to explain if it's right or false. So we have some mini video like that with the doctor to explain and some misinformation and fake news. It is the video only for the social media, for Facebook, Twitter, not for the radio or TV, only for the social media.
So the next one is the resources that were shared by Endel.
This is just an article that I have written about, like explanatory article about how misinformation is happening in Ethiopia. This is not the only article. You can find many of those explanatory articles under my name on Global Voices that I have been writing over the years. And misinformation, and was there in Ethiopia way ahead of like many people recognize. In those articles kind of give you a context in which how misinformation, disinformation was happening, and I give like a political context to it. That is just a resource, an article that I have written.
Thank you very much. We now have the website of Facrescendo. If you want to have a word about it, Rahul.
Okay, so our website, anybody can visit our website. We do do a lot of fact checks. So in the last year itself, we've done around 5,000 odd fact checks in these 11 languages. So anything that is at least in Indian context, if there is something trending, that goes directly to our website. And just to add to it, today we've started with Bangladesh too. So you'd be seeing content from Bangladesh also on our website. So do visit, and if there's something you want us to improve on, please do suggest us.
Thank you very much. Eddie, you had some resources as well?
Yeah, this is a couple Latin American initiatives that are exploring how to provide fact-check information or media literacy resources in native languages. So there's a couple from Ecuador and Peru, and also in Bolivia.
Thank you very much. The resources we have at First Draft. So we have a website that is full of training resources that are all available and free. Most of them are in English, but we have different languages as well. And we also have regular webinars, most of them in English as well, like the ones we have next week about the challenge of reporting on vaccine misinformation, especially looking at 2021. But we have other languages as well in terms of webinars. We have French, Italian, Spanish. So do not hesitate to have a look. We also have a daily and weekly newsletter with the trending narratives of misinformation, cross-border misinformation that we are seeing in our monitoring from India to the US to Australia, and Chinese-speaking languages, Chinese-speaking, online spaces, for example. So do not hesitate to have a look there. We are announcing events and interesting readings as well. And we have a course for those of you who really want training and want to get their hands dirty a bit on specifically online investigation. We have a course on video that is available, that is really in bite size and easy to navigate in these 7 languages. So it's including Hindi, and it's really a way to get your way around. It's focused on coronavirus, but really all the things you can learn there are useful for every kind of topic. And then they are related to tools. Most of you might know these tools already, but we have this toolkit that we keep updated all the time of free-to-use tools that you can use. And every time that a tool is not available anymore, we update it on the toolbox. So do not hesitate to look at that. And I agree on the fact that these might not be as useful in under-resourced languages, but maybe using them and getting back to the creators is also a way to make it progress, or to at least see how it works to develop other tools that might be interesting as well. So I now just have to thank you all very much for your attention, for your time. This has been a very, very interesting conversation. I want to thank you, Eddie, very much for listening to me when I came to you and said, we have to do a webinar about that with Global Voices and Rising Voices. That's really wonderful that we could do that together. I want to thank our speakers, Penai, Rahul, and Dalk. Thank you so much for taking the time of being here today. For some of you, it's very early. For others, it's very late. So really, thank you so much for being here with us. Thanks to Jennifer also for supporting the organization of this webinar and reaching out to us with your questions and comments, and stay safe. Thank you very much.